Every single thing that you see around us requires some sort of relationship in order to survive, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah can give anyone or anything what they want or need if He wills. And because of this makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely independent. Nothing can be able to be alive or even be functioning without Allah's command. So why do we persist on being hasty when it comes to dua? You want things like friends that remind you of Allah, success in your endeavors, family. Yes, this is good. We want these things, but we have to remember that we're in this life for a test. And patience is just something amazing, something so beloved to Allah that if we exercise, we can become better Muslims. And if we remember one of the 6 pillars of Iman, one of them being to believe in the divine decree, the good and the bad, what better way to get closer to Allah by doing this? Because by remembering that we may not get something that we want, but we already have so many blessings from Allah, that is amazing. Because Allah knows everything. Allah knows what we will get, what we won't get, and what is good for us. So if we can trust Allah and put that full trust in, not half trust, but full trust, I think we'll do way better as Muslims. I remember this one scenario that I was in where I was going to be late for school. And what I thought at the time was all I have to do is get to the bus stop as fast as possible. However, this wasn't that straightforward because one of the better ways to act as Muslims is to make dua. We call upon Allah so that we can get our requests fulfilled, not rely on ourselves completely. So going back to that story, I had made dua so that I can get to the bus stop on time. And somehow after the bus stop being 2 stops away from me, I had still managed to get to the bus stop. However, the more important story or lesson here is that even if the entire world was to try and benefit you with something, they would not be able to accept by Allah's permission. And obviously what I mean by that is that it had been decreed. So if you want to endeavor in something, you have to make sure that you ask Allah first, because then you will have less worries in your endeavors. You won't be thinking too much, because now you know, if I make this dua, if it happens, it had been decreed for me. If it doesn't, you know what, I'm fine with it. Because this is just the way that things are. And Allah knows what is better for me, and Allah knows what isn't. As we all know that Allah knows the unseen. What could have happened if that dua had been accepted could have been far worse than if that dua had not been accepted. So another point that actually this links quite well to is making dua for very mundane things. This is an amazing way to build your relationship with Allah. Because imagine, right? You're making dua all the time to Allah, and you're seeing your relationship with Him grow because you're always turning to Allah first, and you're turning to Allah for very basic things. Wouldn't it be quite easy to say that this dua to Allah would become a habit? Because the more you do it, the more you become conscious of Allah. Like I said before, the better your relationship grows, and the more likely you are to see even tons more du'as be answered, rather than you focusing on one very specific du'a and you getting upset when you haven't seen it as soon as you'd like to see it. This ties up really well into the next point, which is making du'a like how the Prophet ﷺ made du'a. Now, one of the things that you can do, which is an obvious sunnah, is calling upon Allah like how the Prophet ﷺ did it, like by using his names, like Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Quddus. And whilst doing this, you can also raise your hands by doing actions that obviously have been done by the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, another thing that you can do is send salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in your dua, and also praise Allah. But an amazing video that has been made by Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, who is a scholar in Islam, is about dua, and it is extremely amazing and concise, that you can find in the description. You can also make dua in prostration, in which you are closest to Allah. Now, what would really show that you are serious about your dua being accepted or answered is making your dua at the time of tahajjud, which is the last third portion of the night. How great would it be if you were praying to Allah at that time where it's completely dark, where a lot of people are sleeping, and in prostration you ask Allah sincerely from the bottom of your heart what you want, and you're content that afterwards you think good of Allah, obviously, but if you don't get what you want, you don't complain. You say, that's just what it is. And if you do, you become grateful. And that's one of the greatest things that you could do. Now, a dua that you can recite found in Surah Al-Baqarah is رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. This dua is very comprehensive and covers basically everything we want from this world and the next, and also protects us from the fire, which is extremely important. Forgot to mention, I also have a Discord server in the description. We have events for brothers and sisters, and it's completely segregated, so there will be no free mixing. If you want to join, just check the description. Now we're moving on to the final things that you should avoid while making dua. And the first thing is hasting. Why are you frustrated and, making your dua as fast as possible? Making your dua thinking that you will get it tomorrow. When you make it, you should have in mind that you are going to think good of Allah and you are going to remain patient. By hasting, it's not really a good sign for you. It's not a good thing that you should be doing. And this also leads to, when you're making dua, having good etiquettes, like actually focusing in your dua and paying attention. Because if you're making dua and you're thinking of two different things, like your heart is distracted, do you really think that it will be accepted? Obviously, you can't ask for something haram, like I want to become a Nabi, or something that is just logically doesn't make sense, like I want to split the mountains open. These things just don't work. So the final point, which really isn't things to avoid, but rather things to do, is to seek the pleasure of Allah. And I'll have videos in the description by scholars that are explaining this in a way that is very easy to be understood. So, Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.